Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and today I'm going to be working on a Daiwa Regal Z. This is a about a 7,000 size reel. Actually, it says the 5,000T. We'll go with that. Made in Korea, probably in the 1990s. Generally, you can tell the age of a reel if they have these wooden knobs. They're older because that got outlawed at some point in time as an endangered species. I believe that's redwood. But regardless, this reel is in good condition. It's used for surf fishing and ocean fishing. We're going to take this reel completely apart, show you how to service it, and well, how to keep it fishing for a long time to come. I'm going to do that by starting by removing the spool and the exterior pieces. And while I do that, I want to encourage you to subscribe to my channel if you like the art of fishing reel service and repair. If you like to learn about the manufacturers, about how the reels were made. I cover all kinds of reels. I cover the spinning reels like this. I cover the conventional reels, bait casting reels, new reels and old reels, all kinds of reels. So if you like to learn about the variety of reels, their fishing environments and manufacturers, please subscribe. And if you do subscribe, use that notification button. After I remove the spool, I remove the click ratchet and the spool shim. And well, next up is going to be to remove the handle. If you turn the handle and the screw on the other side is moving, that means that you have a shaft that goes through the main gear, and in order to remove that handle you need to remove this screw. Generally, if that knob there is not moving, it would suggest that the handle is screwed into the main gear. But I recommend that you always remove this side plate screw or cap regardless, just because there are some models, particularly with Daiwa and other manufacturers, that have a screw hidden underneath that cap, and well, you don't want to get in trouble there. So if you tried to turn this as an unscrew, you'd snap that shaft off. When I take my pieces and parts off, they go into a parts tray. The parts tray helps me keep track of what I do with all the ones that have been removed. Next up then, we want to remove the rotor. The rotor has got a rotor nut. There's a big swing plate on there, and then there's a little screw that is holding that tie-down plate to the top of the rotor. So you want to remove the screw and the plate, and then we can remove the rotor nut. That's either a 14, it looks like about a 14 millimeter at the moment. Let's see if we can get that off. And that does come off in a traditional counterclockwise manner. If you're working on a reel and you go to take it off in a counterclockwise manner and it seems like it's stuck or not moving, reverse course. It may be that that is a counter or reverse threaded nut that needs to be removed in the opposite direction. With that nut off, we can remove the rotor. Let's take a check underneath what's going on with the rotor. We have a centering piece here and not much more. I'm going to use penetrating oil on the seams of the rotor where the bail arm meets the rotor on both sides. Work that through, and if it snaps nice and free and easy like this, you don't need to do anything more with that service. We're going to come up top then. We're going to look at what we have in terms of how this is set up. We have an anti-reverse override, which is a traditional dog. It does have a spring here, so if you are working on this reel, you've lost sight of the spring or how the spring goes. Notice that the spring is locked on the shoulder over here. It actually has a hook that goes down here, wraps around the screw, and anchors into the side plate here. It's always good to notice that when you're doing your work on your reels because, well, if something goes amiss, you don't want to start trying to figure it out. If you can take a picture and take a quick look at it to understand how it was made before you started. I've just removed the click ratchet and the shim that goes on top. And I also just mentioned take a picture. I always recommend that you take pictures along the way. Those pictures will help you in case you get lost. It's very easy to get distracted and kind of forget where a piece came off from. It's also easy to get so caught up in the enthusiasm of doing a reel repair that, well, you're just taking pieces and parts off everywhere and you're scattering them. Well, that's never a good strategy. So I always recommend that you have thought out in advance what you're going to do with the pieces and parts that you take off prior to you starting to take them off. All right. I want to see if I can swing this out of the way so that I can get to the other one. This is going to release the main bearing and the pinion shaft. So I just want to get these out of the way. They're using the screw to hold down that bearing in the middle there. And before I bring the rest of that up and out, we're going to remove the side case. My part strategy is a parts tray. I use a parts tray that's double-sided. It has 8 corners. And those corners help me to organize my pieces and parts that I take off kind of by subassembly. When I remove the screws from the rest of this reel, now I'm going to lay them on my table and notice any differences that may exist. So for example, the first 2 screws look to be the same. We'll see how we continue. Here's your third one. And then there's a good likelihood that all 4 of these screws are the same. There's a lot of reels out there that don't follow that same principle. They have larger, smaller, thinner, fatter type screws. And you do need to pay attention to them when disassembling. I'm going to put those in one of the corners of that parts tray I just showed you, and now we should be able to lift out the side plate. And I'm going to rotate now the reel so that we bring that crosswind block down to the low point. This looks to be a 2 or 3 ball bearing reel. That's really all you need. By today's standards, everybody wants to put a lot of ball bearings in a reel. While they're good and convenient, you really need the ball bearing on each side of the main gear and on the pinion shaft. That's where all the work is being done. And anything else is just kind of a bonus. All right, we've taken out the crosswind block and the axle shaft. They're very clean. If I can say anything about this reel, it's dry. We should be able to lift out the main gear now, and we do have a bearing on the back of the main gear as well. We can remove the oscillation gear, and we can come back up here, take out the pinion gear and the bearing at this point. Everything else about this case is pretty clean. Notice on the back here, if you've had a V-shaped spring jump out at you, that's where it belongs. Right back there, it holds tension on the anti-reverse override. I'm just going to spray the case down here and do a little quick mop up here. I did notice there's a little bit of dirt or old grease sitting underneath that oscillation gear position. The rest of the reel, I would say that this reel is dry because the greases and oils have evaporated. But that's all you need to do to clean the case up. And now we'll just do the parts. And we start in the reverse order that we took them off in. So the last one out was this oscillation gear. Again, you want to take a moment to clean up. There's some dried grease in the back of this. You want to inspect all of the teeth, make sure that they're uniform, that they're not chipped or cracked. Take your grease brush that's filled with fishing reel grease. I'm using Penn Precision Reel Grease for this. And get a good amount of grease onto the teeth, the face where that crosswind gear or block is going to ride, and the back where it's going to ride around the case. Once you've completed that, you can bring that back into the reel, set the stud to the low end. If this had dirt on it, you would clean it off. Right now, there's no dirt, it's dry. With the crosswind block, you want to get the grease on the back and in the slot. That's the only pieces that are going to be movable parts that are going to touch anything. And then put that onto the oscillation gear where the slot in the oscillation gear sits over that stud. Let's see if we can remove this bearing. We can. This is a bearing that's got an open shield to it. I like the oil bearings. If I put grease onto here and it accumulates micro sands and salts, it leads to a very rough performance. I prefer not to do that. Test the bearing. I probably should have put the bearing in first. Thinking I may have to raise the other piece. We'll see. Nope, we were able to snap that in. So snap your bearing into the back of the case. You can pull the one off the front here and do the same thing. I do it on both sides. It will work its way under the shield. I'll just put it in the side plate case for now. There is cleaning to be done here. All of the grease that was on the main gear is now sitting inside of it. So I'm using a penetrating oil to dissolve that grease, or at least soften that grease. And then I'm coming in with a cotton swab to mop it up. Well, this is a good place to encourage you to ask questions if you're working on a reel. Maybe you're stuck. If you have desire to learn more about this particular reel. Personally, I like the Regal series of reels. They've been around a long time and they've been very well made. Maybe you want to ask what those two little shim washers are and where they fell out of. Just leave those questions in the comments section. I will try to answer those for you. You don't have to leave that question about the shim washers. They go right here. And you'll notice that there is a plastic piece in here. Sometimes that comes out with the handle screws. Sometimes it just gets jammed in there. Right now it's jammed in there. And just leave it because you're going to put that handle screw right back in there. It's also a good reminder to me that this handle is mounted on the right-hand side. Most of the time, these reels are set up for left-hand crank. That's because they tell me when the reel is mounted under a pole, you need your dominant hand to manage the pole. And so most of the world is right-handed, and the reels are set up with left-hand cranks. There you go. All right, we're going to leave that off to the side for a moment. We got one more bearing here. This one's got a traditional shield on it, but again, it's not a sealed, it's a shield. So we'll do the same thing. Oil that. One more time to clean this up. I notice there's some pretty hardened grease in here, so I'll use the penetrating oil spray again. Come back in here with the bristle brush. These are part of those brush packs that you find in dollar stores or hardware stores or home supply stores or the like. They do a good job of getting into the valleys of the pinion gear. So once you do that, inspect it, make sure that all of those teeth are uniform, that they're not chipped or broken. If they are, you would have a thump going on when you're reeling. And unfortunately, with the age of this reel, you probably wouldn't find a replacement part for that. So unless you can fish with that thump, you would probably be done. All right, we've greased up the bottom of the gear. Going to bring the oiled bearing over. That seats onto the top of that thread. Bring that whole assembly in. And we can kind of reverse ordering the way that we brought this in. Press down to make sure that your bearing is seated flush. This one just needs to walk down a little bit. I'm going to take one of the two screws that are holding that down as a cap. Bring that in. Okay, we got one more we can bring in. So overall, a nicely made reel. This one, I guess I need to move that back again so that I have the clearance to put in the second of the tie-down screws. And then once you have them tightened down, just turn it, make sure that everything's turning fine, which it is. Let's take that main gear, which has been greased and cleaned, and that goes in next. After you've installed the main gear, the next piece in is your axle shaft. I think just a light coating of grease on that. You don't need a lot. Bring that over and down through your crosswind block. Make sure that the hole aligns. You go to your parts tray with the flathead Phillips screw. That's the tapered screw that fits in the crosswind block and holds your axle shaft to it. That's a fairly traditional design in these reels. You'll find that in a lot of spinning reels. Bring that down. And now you have to put your side plate on before you can put your rotor back on. So put the oiled bearing back on, bring the side plate over, and we said all four of these screws are the same, so it doesn't matter what holes they go in, but when I tighten them, I like to make sure that I go kind of opposite. That way I don't risk binding the case. You kind of go in a circular motion. Sometimes something's out of alignment and it just tends to jam it up. Okay, that's 2 of the 4. Going in the next pattern here, we'll go down to the bottom for the 3rd screw and come up to the top for the 4th. It's kind of the exact opposite way that we took these off. But again, it's a good practice to not go direct, if you will. Okay, bring that in and on. Now we can bring our rotor on. Rotor nut. Hand tighten these. Make sure that they're threaded properly. You don't want to cross thread these. Next up then is your lockdown. This is a substantial lockdown. I'm not quite sure why it was developed that way, but it is. Tighten that down. Next then we have our click ratchet and shim washer. Click ratchet goes on first. This one has 2 shim washers on it. That ensures good spool height so that it spools evenly. As we mentioned, this was mounted from the right side as a right side crank. And then we can bring our screw cap in from the other side to tighten down the handle. All right, just about there. All tight. This reel has a collapsible handle, so I'm not sure if that button's working. I didn't test it before, but it's always a good idea. While you have that penetrating oil, give it a couple of squirts. See if you can't loosen it up and collapse it, which we can. That's wonderful. All right, that works. And the last thing to service then is the drag set. The drags are retained by a clip. It's a 5-star clip with open ends. Find a pick or a small screwdriver or something to get one of those ends out. This is a spring clip, and it will shoot if you're not careful. So take your time, remove it, and put it into a safe place. You can then remove the washers. I'm thinking we have felt washers in here. We do. There's nothing wrong with felt washers. You just need to make sure that you keep them lubricated. If you don't lubricate them, they have a tendency to dry out and break. And this is a traditional 6-washer set. Make sure that your inner cavity is cleaned. Get the old dirt and debris out, and then we can reset First washer goes in, and the way to keep them nice and lubricated, use some fishing reel oil. You could, if you wanted to, use fishing reel grease. These are permeable and they absorb oil real quick and they don't release it, so I like the oil. You're going to find one that has 2 studs on it, in this case bent clips, that goes in the down position in the slots in the reel. Last one of our washers. Again, a good wet on that. Second of the keyed washers goes in. Go back to your parts tray and get your 5-star spring. I like to anchor one side of that in the slot and then work it around, and you'll notice I'm holding it with my hand because, well, these have shot out in the past and there's no reason to think that that won't happen again. It's just a retention clip. It doesn't have anything to do with the actual drag performance. It's there so that when you take the spool off, that the drag washers don't fall out. Okay, let's put that back on. Before I do, I'm going to use a little scrubby pad and a rod and reel cleaner. There's some salts on the inner part of this. I'm going to just pull that off. Clean that up. Do the best that I can. Okay. Let's just tarnish. Let's bring the spool back on. Bring the adjuster on. We'll be ready to give it a test. We'll see how we did. So Nick sent in a couple of these. He's got some very large saltwater spinning reels. These are ideal for being used from the surf. You can use these from a boat. You can use them to jig, to live line, or to troll. All right, once I do that, I like to back it off after I've tightened it down to ensure that the drags are holding. That way I don't press the oils and greases out that we just put on those drags. Okay, let's give it a test then. What did we do? We took the reel apart completely, cleaned and inspected all the pieces and parts, re-oiled, re-lubed, reassembled, and get this one ready to go again. Very attractive looking reel. This one turns nice and free and easy, and as I mentioned, all you really need is those 3 ball bearings, one on each side of the main gear and one on the pinion gear. The rest of them, well, they're window dressing. You just don't need them, but this one is great, and you can see why people enjoy the Daiwa Regal reel. Well, I hope you've enjoyed that. Before I leave, I want to thank our first responders, our fire, our safety, our EMT, our police, everybody who's involved in keeping us out of harm's way. I want to thank you, the viewers, and wish everybody a great day. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle.